King of the Hill is one of the best cartoons ever to hit the small screen. It's far from the silliness and absurdity that comes with other cartoons like Family Guy or South Park. It's a surprisingly subtle depiction of a small town in Texas. Despite being relatively pleasant and relatable in tone, the series may just be darker than what meets the eye. Welcome back to The Binger. In this video, we'll dive into some theories that, if true, would change the entire dynamic of the show and force us to watch it in a completely different light. This is the darkest King of the Hill theories that no one saw coming. Hank isn't Bobby's real father. If you've watched the show, you've probably heard about Hank's unfortunate urethra. It's no secret that Hank Hill suffers from a narrow urethra, as mentioned several times throughout the series. With that fact well established, it's surprising that he and his wife Peggy would be able to conceive a child. In fact, the Hills were outright told they would never have a child, and their son Bobby was born against all odds. On top of that, it's odd that their child would look so similar to Hank's best friend Bill. Bobby Hill has a lot more in common with Bill than Hank. For starters, they share an insatiable appetite. They also resemble one another, both being short and let's use the word portly to be polite. Bobby and Hank actually look nothing alike. Bill even passes along his family's famous recipe to Bobby in order to keep the tradition alive. While most fans would just chalk this up as Bill choosing someone just because he doesn't have a family of his own, there might just be a deeper reason why he chose Bobby. Perhaps the longest tell is Peggy and Bill's relationship, an often one-sided one. Bill's recurring crush on Peggy is apparent throughout the series, with the sentiment seemingly going unrequited. However, Peggy does admit under duress that she slept with Hank and one other man. We never find out who that was though. Could it have been Bill in a moment of weakness? There's a decent amount of evidence pointing in that direction. Dale purposefully ignores his wife's infidelity. Dale is a conspiracy nut who questions everything and doesn't trust anything. He's extremely paranoid. He watches surveillance cameras all over his street and monitors all incoming and outgoing phone calls. He's a top-notch conspiracy theorist who finds a way to poke and prod everything. He's even let it slip that he has a tracking chip put in his wife Nancy. There's no conceivable reason why he'd be so trustworthy with his wife and her obvious boyfriend John Redcorn. He'd never questioned the fact that his son looks exactly like the man his wife spends all that time with. Really? The man that questions absolutely everything never thought twice about that one? It's a bit tough to believe. This theory concludes that Dale knows full well about his wife's cheating, but chooses to purposefully ignore it. That's about as dark and sad as daytime cartoons get, I'll tell you what. According to the theory, Dale's life is so fragile, and he has such a weak hold on his sanity, that without Nancy, he'd dissolve into a full-blown homicidal psychopath. He also knows that Joseph isn't his son, but chooses to play along and convince himself it's the truth. Another theory suggests that Dale, Nancy, and John Redcorn are instead in a secret polyamorous relationship. Dale, being an asexual, has a strong bond with his wife, but not so much in a sexual way. That's where John comes in to bat cleanup. The throuple knows that they'll be shunned in their small Texas town, especially during the 90s when this show takes place, so they keep the triple-pronged relationship a secret. Whether Dale is part of it or not, there's no way he doesn't know about his wife and her special friend. Hank has Asperger's. Hank Hill is undeniably a peculiar man. He's got his quirks, but we've never really stopped to think that it might be a medical condition. If you think about it though, this actually makes a lot of sense. For starters, his obsession with propane and propane accessories is classic Asperger's behavior. It's a common trait of someone with the condition to become obsessive about a particular thing of interest. Hank is also extremely uncomfortable with sexuality and at times can be distant with his family. In fact, he can be extremely cold at times. While it could be just chalked up to white male from Texas to explain his seemingly bottled up personality, Asperger's could be another explanation as to why Hank rarely shows emotion. Fans have also speculated that Hank is on the autism spectrum, or that he deals with obsessive-compulsive personality disorder. Hank is a closeted homosexual. Originally proposed by Redditor Rose Wolfe, this theory suggests that the series King of the Hill is about suppressing homosexuality in Middle America. While surprising at first, this theory does carry some strong evidence once inspected. Growing up with a manly father like Cotton and sticking to strict Christian beliefs doesn't sound easy, no matter your sexual preferences. However, Hank was forced to suppress this side of himself. Cotton knew all along. Why do you think he was so hard on his boy? Even Hank's mother always had a kind, caring, but never quite supportive way of interacting with her boy. Hank suppressed his feelings to such a degree that he developed a false hatred for anything considered flamboyant, like feelings or stage performance. It's why he rarely shows emotion, and instead turned into the most basic, plain white guy there ever was. I mean, work boots, jeans, and a white t-shirt 365 days a year? That guy's hiding something. In fact, Hank is constantly trying to suppress his own son Bobby from living a free lifestyle. He's constantly worried for his son, who just wants to express himself and be who he is. Now, before you sound off in the comments explaining that Hank is married with a kid and this theory is bogus, that's explained as well. Not only is Peggy accepting, but her massive feet, male build, and boyish personality made it easy for Hank to make her his beard. Still, he rarely touches her or shows any kind of affection. Peggy suffered brain damage. In the finale of season 3, Peggy suffered a devastating skydiving accident that nearly took her life. She survived, however, and things went back to normal. At least, that's how it seemed. In reality, things never quite went back to normal. If you watch carefully, season 4 begins with a very different Peggy. She's a lot more narcissistic and dismissive of others. She seems to be more negative as well. Even her Spanish language skills, which used to be the way she earned an income, appear to deteriorate. Clearly, her near-fatal incident had a larger effect on her than originally imagined, and it actually caused some serious long-lasting damages. Cotton has a narrow urethra. We've already touched on Hank's narrow urethra. Not literally, of course, that would be gross. But Hank's urethra issue is an often used jab that Cotton uses to belittle and berate his son. Throughout the series, Cotton pokes fun at his son on more than one handful of occasions. He also uses Hank's shortcomings to brag about how awesome he is. It's a bit excessive, almost to the degree of an insecure person trying to overcompensate for something. There are a couple facts that would prove Cotton suffers from the same condition as his son, but hides it out of shame. For starters, Cotton has 3 kids. For a man who boasts about his own urethra and about how often he has sex, you'd assume he'd have more children than that. Secondly, Cotton said that Hank got his narrow urethra from his mother, but when Hank meets his long-lost Japanese half-brother, he too suffers from a narrow urethra. They shared the same father, not mother. And on top of that, Cotton treated the birth of his newest son, GH, like he just won the Super Bowl. It was the biggest thing ever, as though he was celebrating a miracle. Why would a man who's already fathered 2 kids be so overwhelmed, shocked, and ecstatic about having another kid? Clearly, he didn't expect that to happen. Finally, Cotton is known to brag about himself, but omit any shortcomings. He's clearly got some major insecurities, and his urethra may be the root of them all. Again, not literally. Cotton faked his own death. Speaking of Cotton, in season 12, Hank's father finally bites the dust. According to Redditor Dr. J, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye. In a season 4 episode, Luann moves out of Hank's den and into the house across the street after a neighbor dies. During the credits of said episode, Cotton and his war buddy Topsy visit the house looking for the original owner. A dude in the swimming pool calls them Nazis. Cotton and his pal force him inside, close the door, and then you never hear about Luann's roommates ever again. As the theory goes, Cotton and Topsy actually killed the young man for calling them Nazis, along with 2 other roommates in order to ensure there were no witnesses. The pair dismembered the bodies and disposed of the evidence. Years later, in the episode Dale Tech, we learned that the house was left abandoned until the remaining family cleaned it out. During their cleaning, they find Topsy's confession, and this begins a police investigation. Cotton realizes that the police are now after him and closing in, so he fakes his own death and disappears. At an age where a natural death isn't out of the question, Cotton actually changed his identity and probably fled to Mexico. Dale's catchphrase explained. Dale Gribble has this weird catchphrase that he always uses throughout the series. It's kind of just a nonsense gibberish noise he likes to make that goes, "Sha-sha." He's a quirky guy, so nobody ever wondered why he'd utter a random noise from time to time. He'd use it in pretty much any scenario, whether he was letting a falcon out of its hood or sneaking around a closed megalomart. It was always his go-to exclamation, and nobody thought twice about it. But what if Sasha actually meant something? According to Redditor Supermensa.org, the phrase is actually quite meaningful. We know that Dale speaks Russian, and USA in Russian is actually 3 Russian letters that make the sound S, SH, and A when pronounced individually. Strung together, it makes Sasha. Could Dale be chanting USA this whole time? Was Sasha really a patriotic exclamation? It's very possible. Boomhauer is an undercover spy. In the very last episode of the series, it's revealed that Boomhauer is, in fact, a Texas Ranger. Wait, what? The guy who would lounge around all day, sunbathe in a thong, and chase women constantly was actually a what now? Also, the guys would stand in their alley constantly complaining about their jobs. Boomhauer's line of work never once came up. In all of those years? The guys never questioned what their best friend did for a living? That's beyond strange. The theory is that Boomhauer is actually an undercover spy, which would explain his seemingly low-key lifestyle. The big question is why he would be undercover in such a small town like Arlen, Texas. There's one reason that kind of makes sense. He was secretly observing Dale. Dale makes no secret of his distaste and distrust of the government. He's been a member of at least one local militia movement that we know of, has trafficked illegal weapons, and seems to have connections to international criminals. It's possible that Boomhauer was actually an undercover agent living in Arlen just to keep tabs on a suspicious character. And what better way to keep an eye on someone than to become one of their closest friends? Those are some of the darkest theories surrounding King of the Hill. Do you have any of your own theories that could be added to the list? Make sure you leave your thoughts in the comment section below. Also, make sure to hit that thumbs up button and subscribe to our channel. Until next time, you've been watching The Binger.